Alright, y'all, so I'm here with another quick little video. So, if you guys do not know, this is for everybody. I mean, even if you don't, I'll still explain what's going on. So, the Joe Budden podcast. Okay, so I woke up this morning and I seen that Rory and Maul was trending. And so I'm like, well, what the hell happened? I know it's Wednesday, and I know the podcast drops on Wednesdays and Saturdays, I believe. And so, I have a really, I have a bad history with Joe Budden. We're very up and down with each other, like as far as like how I feel about him. It's up and down. It changes a lot. It changes a lot. But anyway, so I woke up this morning and then I see everybody pretty much saying like, that they not on this past episodes, they're not on at all. They're not on this episode. And so everybody's like, well, what's going on? Like, it's probably over, da 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 da. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, I watched last week's one or Saturday's podcast, and they weren't there, and Joe said that they were on vacation. Now, I didn't really take that anyway. I was like, okay, maybe they just both wanted to like not be here at the same time. I really didn't look that deep into it, but the fans ain't with the shit. They look deep into it, and so then apparently today, when Joe did his podcast, he addressed pretty much why is it that they're not there. So Joe started off by saying, and I literally just got done listening to the whole thing, like all the way up until he said, let's get into some verses, and then Parks was like, yeah, like let's talk about that. So I listened to the whole full thing. Okay, so Joe first wanted to start off by saying that he's not replacing them. So if y'all watch it, y'all seen last week that Ice was there and Savon was there. Now Ice is one of Joe's friends. Savon is like, I guess an intern, I guess you would call. He been an intern for a long time, but he do like the timestamps and other little stuff to like help, on the podcast. A lot of times if you listen to the podcast or you watch it on YouTube, like he's always on the side, but you see him, you want to know who he's the guy who normally comes and picks up like the cups. That's who he is normally. If you don't know what he looks like, he's normally the guy who you'll see come in, hand Joe a cup or pick up some cups or something like that off the table. But anyway, people wasn't feeling them being on the show. I personally didn't hate them like on Saturday. I thought Ice was funny because to me Ice is funny whenever I do hear him. He's funny to me. Savon, to me, I didn't agree with a lot of his opinions, but he's young. I mean, ain't Savon? No, Savon is the same age as me. Is he the same age as me, or is he? How old is? I'm sorry, y'all. I want to make sure because I don't want to. I feel like maybe he is the same age as me. I'm sorry. I'm looking this up for a reason. Because I want to understand. Oh, I have no idea. I don't know how old he is, but I don't know. Maybe me and him is around the same age. But that's why I'm saying he's like a younger perspective. Is pretty much what I was saying, and that's what Rory is. And so I could see how some people could think that maybe these are the two people that's coming in to replace them or whatever. But he said that Joe said that they can come back whenever it is that they're ready. That the reason that they're there, it has nothing to do with the money. It's a disagreement, and that Maul pretty much stands on the principles of things. So if he don't like something, then he just don't got to be part of it. Which they end up getting into a little bit later when they talk about how Joe said that he pretty much feels like Maul don't really give a fuck about podcasting. Like he could do it or he could not do it. If y'all don't know, and this is only for people who don't listen or don't watch it, Maul is Big's brother. Biggs is the guy who is pretty much like Jay-Z's right-hand man as far as business partner, Rockefeller, Rock Nation, all of that. So Maul is his little brother. So when he says that, so I do believe when Joe says like Maul doesn't really care about this, you could tell, if you watch the show, you could tell that Maul could take it or leave it as far as this podcast is concerned. Like he want to do when he's there, like whatever. Let's move on. So, let me see. Before I get into also before I get into like the meat and potatoes of it, there was little things I was picking up on that Joe was saying, like when he said that, you know, as far as them doing business and stuff like that together, like a lot of times, you know, they kind of talk to one another. Like Park said, he talks to not necessarily Joe, but he talks to Joe's people or whatever when it comes to like money and stuff like that. But a lot of times Joe said he can have like a conversation with Maul, probably like about money or if there's any problem. But he said Rory takes it another way. Like he wants to do like lawyers and mediation, which maybe he really don't have a problem with that, but it sounded like that was an issue for him. Joe also talks about how he was frustrated. He's a little frustrated because this is the thing. With Ma and Rory, in his opinion, this is what Joe said, because they don't necessarily care too much about the podcasting business part, like they care about this podcast and doing this right, but as far as like building this out, like this is nothing that they want to do. And so because of that, both of them, I don't know if he means Rory, but he pretty much was alluding to the fact that both of them don't really know a whole lot about the business side, and a lot of them don't really want to have to deal with that. And so he's the one pretty much that kind of deals with a lot of the business stuff when it comes to the podcast, and how he wishes that he could sometimes like lean on his friends and be like, hey, what about this, hey, what about that, but they just don't know. Now also remember that, because that ties into to one of the overall points. But he pretty much was like, but I pretty much can't force them to care about something if they don't care about it. I'll save my thoughts for the end. Okay. So, if you guys want to listen to really where it started about now, all the way up until the 59 and 9-minute mark on SoundCloud, he is kind of talking about it, but he's talking about it in general, like he's not really using a specific situation. So starting at the 59 mark going forward is when he pretty much talks about specifically what the issue was between them. So this is what he said. He said the last 6 weeks has been really rough, that there's been a lot of tension, and you know there's a lot of jokes being taken seriously, and Joe also feels like a lot of the jokes is pretty much on him. Now let's stop right there. If you listen to the podcast, or specifically if you watch it on YouTube, there, and especially like you can watch it yourself, but when you also go in the comments, you can see people talking about it all the time. There's some type of tension. It's been some tension between Joe and Rory for quite some time now, and you can tell when you watch that, like, you know how like friends, like they joke on each other, like, which is what they do a lot in the show, but it feels like a lot of the jokes was being taken more seriously. Niggas was getting madder, you know, a little like madder more than like usual. And so there is a point in time where everybody in the comments was like, man, you could tell like they don't like each other. You could tell that they're gonna fight, and they've brought it up a couple of times, like in episodes, joking about it, like, yeah, you know, everybody said we gonna fight, da 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 da, which I'll get to that in a second. But my opinion on that is, that's a fact. There has been some obvious tension between Joe and Rory. But this is just my opinion on because I watch almost all of their, like, at least for the past year, I think I've watched almost every single last one of them, especially the most couple weeks. I know I've watched every single one of them because I'll be having shit to do when I'm working. But in my opinion, from what I see, I feel as if, is it always Joe's fault? Probably not. But I think a lot of times Rory gets frustrated with Joe, because I think Joe has to understand that he's a hard person to work with. Like, you're not the easiest person to work with, especially to have a show with. One of the main things that Joe does specifically to Rory is he overtalks Rory, kind of like how he did later on in the podcast. And after he talked for about almost an hour and a half, he said to Parks, well, I done said everything, but why don't you talk? Why don't you talk? Like, what you think about the male ego? And then Park was like, well, I think, and then Joe literally cut him right off and spoke for a whole another hour. Now, that could be Joe, and Joe could be like, well, y'all know that's just how my crazy mind work. But when you have two other people on the show with you, it's rude to be cutting people off when they're talking. And I know there's one episode in particular where they just keep cutting back and forth to each other because he, like, Rory starts to say something and then Joe stops him and says something else. Then Rory tries to finish his sentence, and then Joe comes in and says something else. Like, I would be frustrated too. That's, to me, from watching, that's one of the reasons I see Rory get, like, a little bit upset with Joe or whatever, or get offended, because nigga, let me talk. Also, I feel like Rory is sometimes, to me, a little bit sensitive. He takes, to me, some of the jokes that are said and he takes it to heart, and he gets real defensive and he gets real upset and real mad, like real white boy mad, where he get real red. When sometimes the jokes really aren't that big of a deal. I also think that Joe hears what he wants to hear a lot of times, especially when it comes from, I mean, I think he does that to everybody, but Joe hears what he wants to hear. So Rory can literally specifically explain to you step by step how to pick up a, like, I don't know, turn the remote. Like, pick up the remote, you grab it, you press the little itty bitty button that's on the top that's red. He could say all of that, and Joe will literally hear that and say, well, what are you talking about? Because what about how you supposed to? And what about how tight? And what about this? Like, he just keeps, it's like he just goes in, and it's like Joe doesn't listen. And I can understand how that could be frustrating for somebody. And especially Rory, to me, separate from Maul, I keep saying Maul is more, I feel like probably more, like, a little bit more professional about it, more straight line professionally, because he has worked at, like, record record companies and stuff like that. So I can see how that can be very frustrating. So let's pause on that for a second. And Ice, like I said before, Ice even said, let's be real, like, y'all really started to pay attention to it specifically because the fans started picking up on it. And Joe said one of his main problems is that they're all friends, but it's been more and more recently that they only talk about business and they don't really talk about, like, friendship stuff. So Joe said that he asked Rory, like, why I don't know, like, nothing about, like, your life or your relationship or your home, like, why I don't really know nothing about that. And he said that Rory said, why the fuck do you need to know? I come in here, I do my job, I put my best foot forward, so why do you need to know all of that? And so Joe also said in that little part, before I comment on that, he was like, well, no, after that, this is what Joe said. He said it in a coded way, but this is exactly what Joe said. Joe said that he specifically wanted to know what was going on with the whole cheating allegations, because if y'all don't know, DJ Academics went on this live stream and pretty much put Rory out on Front Street about allegedly cheating on his girlfriend, and then, fiance, and then after that, like, coming to his house and leaving some fucking threatening ass letter in his mailbox or whatever the case may be. And so when all of those allegations was going on, which was maybe like a couple of weeks ago, maybe like, I don't know, but a couple of weeks ago, it wasn't a long time ago. So from what I'm getting, I think Joe was pretty much saying, like, because he said, he was like, if you don't tell me certain things, I don't know how to protect you. AKA, if you don't tell me what's actually going on with you and your girl, or what the truth is, or what the truth not is, or what the hell is going on between you and DJ Academics, I can't sit on this show and really have your back. I don't really know what to say. I don't know what not to say. People want us to talk about it. Do you want to talk about it? Do you not want to talk about it? So I can understand him. I can understand Joe from that perspective. So Joe talks about, again, like I said, about the fighting and stuff. So Joe was like, I'll go back and I'll watch the show all the time, and I keep seeing, he's like, I keep seeing Rory keep saying to me, like, oh, you want to fight, you want to fight, you want to fight. And he was like, and I've seen myself tell him, I don't play like that with friends because it'll get taken to another level, which I agree. I don't play that shit either. And then he said, it was episode where Rory said to me, well, what if we wasn't friends? And I do remember that moment, and I do remember that episode, because when he said it, I was like, yeah, this ain't it, yeah. And so he was like, Joe was like, what? Like, we not friends. I think it's so cute. He was like, we not friends? Like, for real, we not friends now? Like, so that really bothered Joe. So Joe said pretty much after that, so the whole situation, a little bit after that, is when he asked Rory to take a couple podcasts off because of the tension. Now, Parks and Joe said that Rory said, okay. And he was like, and Parks said, well, when he talked to me, he made it seem like it was fine with him. It was cool with him. I don't think he would be honest with all of y'all for real about his feelings. He probably absolutely did feel some type of way about that, because that, to me, because it goes back to the conversation that Joe had with him before when he said, why do you need to know when I come in and I do my job? So he probably did feel that way. And not only did he feel that way, but Ma felt that way. Ma wanted to understand, wanted to know, why does Joe get to make that decision that Rory can't come in? And now Parks says that, I mean, they both said that, Parks and Joe, they both said that him and Ma really got into it or whatever. And Parks said that on some real shit, Joe's the type of person that he see like a real open wound and he'll pour the whole bag of salt in there. I can't fuck with people like that. And Joe, he was like, for real? He was like, no. And then somebody was like, well, I don't think it was like that. He was like, I was there. It was like that. Joe, you really went hard. You went the fuck off. Like, you really went harder than what you really were supposed to. And Ice was like, well, I mean, I know the type of nigga that Joe is, so I don't really take it that way. But Parks made a good point. You can't expect that from everybody. And I agree. If you're my friend, like, I hate when people use the excuse, oh, well, you know how I am. So, but just because I know how you are, that doesn't mean that that's a good thing. That doesn't mean that that's something that you shouldn't work on changing. You know, like, especially if I'm somebody that's your friend, and y'all know Ma and Joe, like, have, like, lived with each other, all of this other shit. And so, when it comes to the whole thing about taking off for podcasts, this is how I feel about that. I feel like at the end of the day, this all comes down to business and what's in contracts. Point blank, period. I do not know, nobody really knows, which is none of our business, but to me, all of this gets down to, how is this written out in the contract? Now, y'all all know that this is called the Joe Budden Podcast. But my question is, in the contracts, is it is it in there that all final say for everything in regards to the Joe Budden Podcast goes to Joe Budden? Or is it final say must be, approved by, Joe, Ma, and Rory? And I forgot what the hell it's called. The articles with when you're putting together the information for a company, like, your business plan and stuff and all of that, there's like, I forgot what the fuck it's called, but it's like an article pretty much, like, it's just kind of like a list of basic things that is pretty much to be expected, like bulleted points of certain people's, like, restrictions and what they can and cannot do and what their purpose serves. So my thing is, if it's nowhere in that contract, if it says in that contract that at the end of the day, the final editing, cuts, personnel, if all of those final decisions stop with Joe, then as mad as you might be at him, regardless of him being your friend, he legally and business-wise has the right to do that. And if y'all felt as if y'all never wanted that to happen, then Ma and Rory, y'all should have did better business on y'all side to make sure that y'all get more of a say in everything. Now, if that's nowhere in it and it's just all off of a handshake, which it can't be because y'all are business, but let's just say that it is, and it was, then Rory should have brought his ass in, period. And it just is what it is. But I feel like, and specifically, the reason why I really feel like it's Joe who probably really makes the final decision with everything is because of what he talked about him, with him being the main one to deal with the business. He's the main one that deals with everything when it comes to the business. So 9 times out of 10, he probably does get the most payoff as far as like a check or whatever. He probably does get the final say in a lot of things because he's the main one handling the business. So I get what Maul is saying in the sense of like, we are all on this show, and how is it up to you to tell somebody to take the time off? And also, I feel like the only reason kind of why I agree with Maul to a degree is because at the end of the day, Joe, you telling Rory to take time off this show is pretty much saying that he's the one who did something wrong. When in my opinion, both of y'all are wrong. But specifically, like I just said, this is from my opinion from watching the show. Joe, to me, in a lot of times, be the one that be starting shit. He be the one cutting Rory off. He be the one making fun of him. He be the one twisting his words and twisting his points and what the fuck it is that he said and picking at him, to be quite honest. And even like Joe said later, you can't expect everybody to have the same type of skin that you have. If he can learn to deal with the fact that you are super ignorant at times, you don't really know what you're talking about sometimes, you know, you're loud, you're abrasive, all of that, then why can't you deal with the fact that he might not be able to take jokes or certain things the way that you do? You know what I mean? You know, so the reason I agree with Maul is because, like I said, at the end of the day, Joe, that's pretty much to me saying, well, you need to take time off because you need to get your attitude together. When at the end of the day, the way I look at it, it's both of y'all, but to me, Joe, it mostly falls on you. And I hope Joe has taken the time to look at those episodes and not again and again and again to realize that it's really not just him being mad. And even like he said, it could be with the fact that he's dealing with shit that has to do outside of his outside of work, and like he was dealing with that whole situation with act or whatever. So I did not expect this video to be this long. This is ridiculous. So, where am I at? So, long end of it. Joe said that he called Rory and Maul before the show, you know, and that whatever they want to do is whatever it is that they want to do. You know, he still wants to be friends with them. And Joe also said something, even though he said it doesn't have anything to do with money. He said, I mean, it could be. And he alluded to at the end, he was like, I could see people feeling some type of way if they feel like your whole network was built off of their back. He said, but to be quite honest, my entire network, because, you know, Joe Budden has that show and then his other show with Karen Civil, which I'm going to be real, if Joe Budden is watching this, hun, we're not watching that show. We don't care. Karen Civil is not somebody that the average person knows or cares about. And to be quite honest, Karen Civil doesn't really have the best track record. And when I mean track record, I mean reputation amongst like people my age, so like 27 to maybe 30. We don't, when we hear about her, it's not good things. And nobody cares about Bridget. What is her name? Bridget Kelly. Nobody cares about them. Nobody cares about these women. Like, we don't care about their opinion. They don't, what about them draws us in? You gotta find somebody else if you want that to work. That's just my opinion. Because nobody cares about them. We know Bridget Kelly. I'm telling you, I'm in that age bracket. You're probably looking to watch it. We know her from Love and Hip Hop. We know Karen Civil as being Nicki Minaj's PR person, and somebody who, to be quite honest, name is always in some messy shit, especially as of recently. They're nobody we really want to hear talk about anything. That's just me being as real as possible. But yeah, so sorry, I brought that up all to say, he pretty much said, he was like, I know it's hard for y'all to believe, he said, but Rory and Maul's, like, this network wasn't built off of just their, like, blood, sweat, and tears. Like, I had to go and get money from outside of just working with them. Like, there was other things. He said, but I could see somebody feeling some type of way about that. Ultimately, he wants to preserve his friendships, he said. And also, as a side note, just to be petty, he did say later that when Love and Hip Hop had came to him the second time around, like this, whatever the last time him and Sin was on there, and that he was like, when he came to Sin after Love and Hip Hop gave their number, he was like, that's way too low of a number, and at the end of the day, I think that we could just take our shit and go somewhere else and have our own show. And she was like, no, I don't want to do that. You want to know why? Because I'm not gonna lie, Sin get on my damn nerves, but Sin ain't done. Sin know, don't nobody want to just see y'all two together. Y'all not that interested together. And on top of that, Sin knows for a fact she'll get way more, she'll get way more exposure. It's not really even about the money for Sin, in my opinion. It's about at least at that time, it's about the exposure. And people watch Love and Hip Hop. Nobody's gonna just watch me and you, Jeff. Y'all not that interested. But yeah, that's what I think, y'all. I think everybody needs to get it together. I do think that they'll get it. I do think that everything will get back together. But Joe has to take responsibility for his actions in his part in this whole situation. It's not just Rory. It's really not. And if it was, Maul would sit there and still be there. So that should say more about you than it does. That's it, y'all. I'm not bad.